Hello and welcome to Finding Grace. I am your host, Hannah Wallace. This podcast contains stories and conversations with myself and others of our own personal journey to finding grace in the world that we live in today. My mission as someone who lives with a genetic condition and as a writer and a blogger is to guide people to integrate their darkness and their light and find grace in the space wherever they are at. I hope this podcast inspires you to find grace on your own personal journey. Without further ado, let us begin. Hello and welcome to Finding Grace. Today I'm joined by the lovely Amy Lee McCree. Amy is the author of 15 books, a shamanic healer and medical intuitive with 20 years experience helping thousands of women get to the root cause of their issues. She has been featured in a large number of publications and she has a range of courses designed to help and empower people. She is the host of the Happily Holistic podcast. Amy and I were introduced via a friend and I cannot wait to share Amy on here today. So welcome, Amy.
Hi, thank you so much, Hannah. I'm so glad to be here.
Oh, it's so great to have you on. So the first question that I ask everybody on the podcast who comes on is, what does the concept of finding grace mean to you or how you would relate to it?
That's a fun question. I think to me, finding grace is kind of that state of flow and whatever brings us into that state of flow and how we are able to stay in it and or get back into it when we're experiencing the ups and downs of life too. So I think it's kind of like a lifelong pursuit to find grace and find, our center and to stay in our center and then to be feeling good, peaceful, pleasurable, joyful, happy in the easy moments and sometimes in the challenging moments too.
Absolutely. I agree with that. I think it's a lifelong pursuit. I wholeheartedly agree there. I would love you to share some of your story and your journey with my listeners to what led you to where you are today with the work that you do.
Sure, I'd love to. I was a very learning disabled child. So I was kind of a different kind of a kid and I had some, problems in school and things like that. But as I got older, I went to college. I first failed out of college because I had such a learning disability issue. And then I got a handle on that and went back within a year or so and became a teacher. And while I was in college, I was also working as a nanny and I came upon the book Jaguar Woman by Lynn Andrews. And that was because the people I was nannying were really cool. They're actually from the UK. They're living in New England over here in the States. And they didn't have a TV. I was like 18. I graduated high school when I was 17. So I was 18 years old at that point. And I was nannying and all the kids were, I think they were at school or napping. It was daytime. And there was like nothing to do in their house, but they had this huge library. And I do love to read. So I ended up reading Jaguar Woman by Lynn Andrews, which is a book about her shamanic work. And it's very entertaining. And I read it and I was kind of like, I think I do this. Like it felt very familiar. And so I started my medicine path at that point, and I took some classes with the Foundation for Shamanic Studies. And through that process, ended up meeting a woman who introduced me to my medicine teacher, Lori, who then I apprenticed with. And so she taught me an oral tradition that was passed down to her by her teacher. And her teacher learned that from a Native American woman in the American Southwest. And so the intention of that when it was passed from the American Indian line to other races was to preserve the teaching and have it go wider and expand. And so that was kind of my basis. And then at age 23, I started working as a medical intuitive. I didn't really call it that initially. I called it like multidimensional healing. Um, and that was 20 years ago. So I've been working as a medical intuitive for 20 years, and subsequently later started teaching shamanism in classes and everything. And about 10 years into that, I felt the desire to start writing books, and I had some more esoteric projects that I tried to get published at first, but then eventually I got a deal for my first book, The Spiritual Girl's Guide to Dating. And that kind of started me on my path as an author. And now we're here 15 books later.
Amazing.
And I still love what I do. I still have one of the most fascinating jobs in the world, in my opinion.
No.
I find it fascinating.
It is fascinating. And you know what I love about your journey is the authenticity, how you were taught, how that you would pass down the oral tradition that came from the Native American lady. I mean, that's amazing. And it's also empowering to know that we can help preserve traditions and honor that as well, isn't it?
It is. And it was really, a beautiful foundation that allowed me to kind of move into my own way of healing. And many, many years later, just in the last 5 or 10 years, via genetic testing, I learned that I had some American Indian heritage. And so in Shamanic Journey, I connected with way, 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 way back some of the beings who were my ancestors on that side, and got to understand where some of what I was doing that was different, because I do a lot that's different than what I learned from my teacher. As far as those guides, it showed me how some of it came from that. So it was sort of ancestrally, genetically within me. And I was, using those techniques. And then when I met with those guides, those spirit guides, got to understand some of that was derived from my own heritage too, which was pretty cool to learn.
Amazing. And with this work that you do, much of this work is based on rhythms, patterns, seasons. And this is so important, isn't it, when we are reconnecting back with ourselves and healing, to understand our rhythms and our patterns, because it's how we piece things back together, isn't it?
It is. And one of the things I love to do is to help us tune into that. And I use a lot of wisdom and techniques and things also from traditional Chinese medicine and Taoism. And, from the Taoist perspective, we really have incredibly powerful seasonal variations that we can harness for our health. And so that's one of the things that comes up with people a lot. Like right now, we're still in winter and eventually we're moving into spring. I live in a warmer climate. And so the energy of spring is coming closer and you can feel it. And for example, that makes me eat grapefruit, because we're moving into the season where we're wanting to use the sour flavor to move liver and gallbladder qi. And that's the liver is like kind of the springtime organ. Yeah. So there's so much seasonally that we can do. Yeah.
I agree. It's funny, actually. I was walking in the park the other day and I felt like I sniffed spring in the air. I could sense that energy shift. And, it's so true that the more I've learned to honor the seasons with the outside and connect them within me, I don't know, it feels very powerful. It feels very empowering, and it feels like you connect to life and understand things on a deeper level when you do that.
I think you do. And I think it helps bring us back to a little bit of our connection with nature, because we're kind of removed from it now. And, we're kind of in buildings, which is nicer than being outside. It's good, but it's different. We're in buildings, we're on screens, we're living our lives in a way that isn't as connected with nature as we used to be. And so I think it's more important than ever to be tuned into seasons and to kind of still be tuned into what's going on with our world and, the elements that surround us, the atmosphere, the sunlight, the moonlight, and not even from an esoteric place, but just from a natural place to help us stay grounded, because our bodies are made of the same, matter and energy. And that's when we have that's the foundation of who we are. And when we have our connection with our physical bodies strong and healthy, then we feel better while we're incarnated.
Absolutely. What you touched on about being grounded there, it is essential when we're within these bodies, especially when we're more empathic, to keep grounded. What do you love to do to keep grounded?
I love to hike to keep grounded, to get outside, and, the more remote, the better. Not that it has to be crazily remote, but, for me, it's just all about getting away from crowds of people and lots of Wi-Fi, and just getting into trees, among trees, or, it can be desert, it can be beach, it can be whatever you have access to, but getting outside and, disconnecting from screens, I think, is really critical. And then, I one of the things I learned very early on from my late medicine teacher was grounding, and she had us grow roots out of our feet and tailbone, and grow them down straight into the earth, all the way into the center of the earth, and eventually they kind of become one root. And to really feel the earth hold that root in her center, she's benevolently interested in helping us. And so working with the earth co-creatively like that, feel that grounded.
That's been, for me, I believe, a saving grace over the years. And I think it reminds us the importance of, especially when we're feeling a lot more of the kind of higher energy, or you're feeling more connected to things in a more kind of, should we say, esoteric, spiritual way, embodiment, and being in your body and staying in your body helps in a big way. It's and talking of that, I'd love you to, expand a bit more on tools that you use to keep yourself in balance, because, I believe it's kind of a thing we have to, navigate. I think we're learning all the time, and like you say, throughout seasons. But do you have any specific tools other than the hiking that keep you in balance and, help you come back to yourself?
Tons of tools. Oh my gosh, so many tools. The shamanic journeying and automatic writing, which I teach in my Meet Your Guides class, and then the subsequent intermediate and advanced classes that follow that, that's all a regular practice for me. And having worked as a healer and a shaman and a medical intuitive for 20 years, and been doing this work for 25 plus, really, it's also my connection with my spirit guides that is very supportive. And it helps. It's interesting because even though it's a non-physical thing, it actually helps me feel better in my body, because I feel very supported throughout whatever's going on. And then beyond that, I have so many tools, like little things like red light blocking glasses, unplugging my Wi-Fi at night. I happen to not live in a, overly congested, like I don't live in a high rise or anything like that. So I'm able to kind of get some distance from too much Wi-Fi, which is nice. But, I'm very sensitive to that. And I think it's also knowing yourself. Certainly supplements, herbs, I eat organically, at home pretty much 100% whenever possible. When I eat out, I try, but I enjoy life too. I don't consume alcohol or, nicotine or drugs or anything like that. I'm, just I'm very conscious of how things make me feel. And I think that's really what the key is for everybody, is to not be in a state of numbing out, and instead to be in a state of being present in your body. And when you do that, you you naturally feel what does and doesn't feel good to the body. And sometimes that requires some strength of character to be like, no, I don't like being around Wi-Fi. I don't like sleeping around Wi-Fi at night. That's not necessarily the most common thing to hear. It's not completely uncommon. You've probably heard of something about it before, but when there's people in your life that aren't in that state, then sometimes it's also, I think, holding your ground and really being in tune with what you want and need, and to the best of your ability, creating that for yourself. Yeah. And it takes effort.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you've really hit the key point there for anyone listening. It's about learning your own kind of, what's going to work for you, what's going to work for your body, and listening. And we're all different, and we will all have different things. We will all react to things differently. So the more deeper you can learn to understand yourself and trial and error with things and turn down the noise from the outside, go and listen to what's inside is saying, is the key to success with this. And I know, like me, I noticed you love using essential oils. I find them great to work with, and it's something I've been doing since I was a teenager. I currently have patchouli, sandalwood, and orange burning right now in my
nice.
But it's amazing, because I do think there is, I think we're all attuned to different things in different ways. For some people, like, I feel they really resonate with me. I would love to hear your experiences with them too.
Yeah, they resonate with me too. And I wrote the Essential Oils Handbook, so I got to write a book about them. And the mood book has a lot of essential oil rituals in it too. So I loved writing about them. And so, essential oils are incredibly powerful, as you know. We always want to use therapeutic grade, especially for the kinds of things that Hannah and I probably use them for. And the other thing about essential oils is they can be provoking from a traditional Chinese medicine standpoint. So there are some cases where less is more.
Yeah.
In aromatherapy, that's like the most mild way to use them, diffusing. My diffuser right now, it's not on right now. It looks like it turned off, but I think it had lavender and ylang ylang in it.
Nice.
Yeah, that's like kind of one of my go-to blends. But essential oils are, because of that provoking quality, I think they can be used intentionally as medicine as well. And, in so many diverse ways. When we apply, for example, lime essential oil to the body topically, we can positively affect liver function. When we apply jasmine essential oil, when it's diluted in that case, in a carrier oil to the back over the kidneys, we can catalyze kidney yang and get that moving in that channel. Move that kidney, let that kidney yang flow. It flows into the lung channel. We can use that to move stagnancy in the lung, which can help us actually clear symptoms like congestion through putting jasmine essential oil on our backs. There's a lot of medicinal things that we can do with oils that are pretty extraordinary.
No, literally, I have a little ritual every night where I have a blend, which I make up. I soak my feet into, I rub it on the bottom of my feet, on my liver every night. There's a blend.
Beautiful.
And I've been doing, I really do. Yeah. I anoint people, Amy. If you come to bed with me, when you come to bed with me, there's a ritual that takes place.
Aww.
And people laugh, like, I've had friends who are like, what's the smell? but yeah, it's like, I feel it's like an integral part of me, like the smell and the power. And like, I use rosemary oil, for instance, for me as a protection thing. And I think there will always be a deep, deep love affair with rose oil, for instance, like deep.
Oh my gosh, me too. Same.
So it's really nice to share that. And I think we can use oils, for anyone listening, we will all work differently with them, but even just minor things just can really make a difference. And it's also smell, like the power of the right blend can be so empowering and uplifting, just to even if someone on a very basic level on their pulse points, it can be
absolutely
so, good for the soul. My friend's coming into my house is like a spa smell.
Me too. Everyone loves how my house smells.
Yeah, because of it. Yeah, which is a good thing. Like, yeah. So, for anyone listening, Amy has a book on this. So
I do. Yeah.
Moving on from oils, I know that you've written on so many factors because I, like, on a kind of more holistic scale, everything interlinked. So let's talk about energy centers, in this case, chakras. For anyone listening, these are energy centers in the body. I'd love you to share, your thoughts of importance around them and, about keeping them balanced.
Absolutely. My thought on chakras, it's interesting because it's a little bit different than the cultural vernacular, and it's even a little bit different than aspects of what you read in my book. A little bit of chakras. I talk about it more in my Chakras and Crystals cookbook, and that's because Chakras and Crystals cookbook is the only book I self-published. A Little Bit of Chakras is a fabulous book. I co-wrote it with my ex-husband, and it's traditionally published. And so you do use a framework in that case. But as a medical intuitive, my personal experience is that everybody is incredibly diverse, and chakras are a very, very loose guideline, and people have different chakras that are more dominant. They might be, in a certain color family that you might think, but plenty of people have chakras that are completely different colors. And, in the concept of chakras originated in the Vedas and in, Vedic philosophy. And in the course of the different writings in those early times, there were thought to be as many as anywhere from 1 to 144 chakras.
Yeah.
So, I'm not big into hierarchical systems anyways. And part of my work as a medical intuitive is just everybody is so diverse in so many ways. Are there themes? Of course, but everybody's so diverse, and that even means chakras. So I think it's a nice starting place. Like if you read a little bit of chakras or my Chakras and Crystals cookbook, it gives you a great starting place, and it lets you tune into those energy centers in your body. And they're really way stations or kind of collection points where the meridians and the different rivers of energy throughout the body converge and, often swirl together in a bit of a vortex, usually. And so just to, allow yourself to connect to those parts of yourself, like, for example, in the center of your chest, which we would call the heart chakra, to feel that swirl and feel that connection and notice, what does it feel like? Do you sense a color? And, don't necessarily be bound by it has to be a certain color. It changes too. And, just to get, it kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier, just to get more and more in tune and aware of ourselves. And that means, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and energetically. The vibrations, the frequencies, the energy that's flowing through the body all the time. As you are able to tune into that and feel it, then that whole chakra system opens up to you, and you can really get to know yourself even more deeply.
I think it's as simple as that as well. When we have to begin to reconnect to ourselves, what you said is so powerful about even just placing your hand on your heart and just, okay, I'm going to go beyond that. And what does that feel like? It's almost that idea that if you sit with somebody, no matter, if this is totally alien to them, and just get that kind of space quietened around them and just get them to come to that space, we can feel things. And this is our journey back to ourselves, that we remember we are the kind of answer, and we are the key to kind of reactivating or, helping ourselves to realign, essentially.
Absolutely.
And I think that brings me what you've been talking about, that everybody's different. This whole thing that healing is not linear, is it? And understanding that healing is in layers. And, you and I have been on this path a long time in our lives on different journeys, different healing modalities. And, I come across people, including myself, who've done things and maybe something hasn't worked for somebody, but then you do something else and you're like, oh my gosh, this really, and I think it's really understanding, isn't it, that when we stop putting our expectations upon rigid structures, even the more, esoteric ones, and we start to recognize that maybe if something's not working, it doesn't mean the thing is bad. It actually means that maybe it's just not right for you at the time. And actually it's because something else is calling to you. And actually maybe there's a whole plethora of reasons why that isn't right. And I think the more that we empower ourselves to recognize that, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
I completely agree with that. And I think what's right for one person's not for another. For example, a really good example actually is the herb, and specifically the supplement turmeric. And sometimes we take the supplement curcumin, and the high potency active ingredient in turmeric. And I always tell people, if you can tolerate it, it's like some of the best health insurance you could invest in, because it's so good for your body on so many levels. Anti-inflammatory, brain health. I mean, it's just amazing. The other thing turmeric does is it brings things out of, from a traditional Chinese medicine standpoint, it brings things out of latency. And so, that can be really good if it's a manageable amount of latency coming up and out. Latency is kind of frozen, locked, stuck energy. And it's usually on a constitutional level, which is our deepest, most vital life force, like a deep underground river flowing through the body. And so when we move things that are little blocks that are frozen in there, latency, out of the way, then we increase that flow. So that can be really good. If we move too much latency at once, so we get symptoms. A lot of our illness is the movement of latency. So some people can take turmeric in large quantity every day, curcumin, high potency curcumin daily, and have no effect. Personally, if I do that, I am venting so much latency, I'm almost jumping out of my skin. I actually do a specific protocol. It's a turmeric, it's not a fast or anything, but it's like a cleanse that I do for 3 days. And I do it every 2 years. That's how I move latency in a way that keeps me healthy. And it's sort of like it's a maintenance program. So to me, that's like incredibly potent, but there's some people who could do that protocol 24/7, 365 days a year and just feel normal. For me, it's like, doing a healing process.
Yeah. So
everybody's so different.
Yeah. And I think if we begin to own that and recognize that even if you're working with a medical doctor, everybody is so different. It's not one size fits all. And interestingly, actually, I recently interviewed a really lovely medical doctor. And she said that, as a doctor, we need to listen and we need to recognize that, not everything is going to work for certain people. And it's about that. It's the dialogue, isn't it? Between and also knowing your body, like trust your intuition. Even if someone is suggesting something, but your intuition is saying, I'm not sure about that. Actually, like, how can we work between the two then? Okay, this is what I think. This is what you think. How can we bridge that gap? And the more that I wish healers more did this, because I think it would open up a wider space for a deeper healing to happen, but for empowerment and for a different pathway to open up for people much of the time.
I agree. And, I think we are starting to come out of kind of an overall cultural mindset. I think maybe like some of our parents were more in this school of thought where we give our authority and our autonomy over to what seems like an authority figure. So, a doctor, for example, seems like an authority figure. Not that we want kids to misbehave or whatever, but a teacher feels like an authority figure. And I think when we, as adults, once we're, highly functioning adults who absolutely are empathic and, considerate and caring of other people, by the way. But beyond that, when we own that we are our highest authority, we are our own guru. A doctor has knowledge, a healer has knowledge, a book we read has knowledge. We can take what resonates and leave the rest and own our knowing, our inner knowing.
Yeah.
I think that it changes the way that we experience life.
I'd say for me, that's been my greatest teacher and my greatest kind of humbling as well, to really meet that. And we touched upon some of your books. You've written 15. Is there any, there's a lot of books that I will link all of these below. Would you like to share anything about these books? Because, are there any that you would say, okay, this is where to start? And well done you for 15 books, let's just say. Is there anywhere that you would suggest people to start? Or is it a case of like what we've just been discussing, using your intuition and feeling into what's going to work, etc.?
Yes. I think it's kind of what you're drawn to. 100 Days to Calm Guided Journal is my newest book. And that's a really nice book to just, for all levels, but really to just kind of rest into. It's really about relaxing. And, especially this last year or so has been pretty anxiety provoking for people. And this book is there to help with that. So that's a really good one to start with. We have the Little Bit of series. My favorite book in the Little Bit of series that I wrote is A Little Bit of Goddess. It's all about the divine feminine, and it takes you through some neat stuff that I learned from my teacher's teacher and things like that. But it also just has like a nice directory of all different goddesses and just helps you learn to work with them. It talks about all the seasonal celebrations of the goddess. So kind of the divine feminine side of what we were touching on with seasons. There's just a lot in there, and it's a nice quick read. So that's one of my favorites personally. In the Little Bit of series, we have Little Bit of chakras, meditation, mindfulness, and goddess that I wrote. And except for goddess, there are now guided journals for Little Bit of chakras, meditation, and mindfulness. So, if any of those interest you, the journals are nice because they're really, the books are bite-sized anyways, like they're already nice, quick reads. And then with the journals, there's prompts that help you kind of explore the concepts and you write right in there. So if you like journaling, those are really fun.
I love that.
And if you like cooking, the Chakras and Crystals cookbook is smoothies, sorbets, salads, and crystal infusions. And so they're recipes based upon the chakra system. And they talked about like what foods, what flowers, all the ways that are best for each chakra and all the ways you can make these fun recipes with them. Like, cherry blossom heart chakra smoothies and just really fun stuff like that. So it kind of depends what you're into. And actually another one of my favorite books is the mood book because it has 6 different sections, things like turning worry to peace, sadness to joy, heartbreak to love, fear to freedom, lethargy to vitality. And it takes you through the oils, the plants, the crystals for each thing. It gives you a bath ritual for each thing. It gives you a whole like ceremony ritual protocol that you do with a yoga pose for each of the things. It's a really fun book. And I just love bath ritual stuff. So if you like that kind of stuff, the mood book is so much fun. And it's really pretty too. It's like all rainbow color pastel. It's gorgeously designed by my publisher and the staff there. So there's a lot of fun options.
A lot of fun options. Absolutely love that. So yeah, I will link all of this for people to access all of your books. And I would say go in, like Amy says, have a look around and see what resonates, and maybe what she suggested, you're instantly like, oh, that's the one for me. Just you touched upon before we close up, working with your spirit guides. I know you help people connect to this, and it's like you say, it's a really empowering thing, isn't it, to help people to connect with the beings beyond our physical eye.
It is. It's life-changing, and it's incredibly enhancing for people, in the good moments, but especially when we're struggling. If you've learned how to communicate with your guides and built a relationship with them over time, then you really do have a support team that's there to guide you and to comfort you even when, things are tough. And I think a lot of us don't have that. And a lot of times we feel alone, even if we have people in our lives, like we don't feel always understood, which I think is a basic human need. And because our guides are non-physical beings of a high vibration who are, putting a portion of their focus on and assisting us and providing us with unconditional love, it's a beautiful experience to connect to. And it's actually a very symbiotic relationship, because for the guides, they have their reasons for doing that. Either they love it, they love service, they're learning something, whatever they're up to. And, it's always this win-win relationship. And when we have that in our lives, I don't know, I feel like it just makes it a little bit easier, because life can have great parts and tough parts. And there's a stability to having a spirit guide team that you build a relationship with over time. That feels really nice.
And I, later on in the year, Amy actually does work and courses around this. So if you are interested in this, keep an eye on her website. All of that will be on the page. And as we close up, Amy, I would love you to share your parting wisdom with my listeners.
What a good way to put that. My parting wisdom is that you live in an infinitely intelligent, self-correcting, and self-regulating body. And the more that you can relax and surrender into that, obviously taking action as needed, and the more that you can go into finding joy and pleasure and peace in that experience, the more good feelings and good feeling thoughts that you can generate and focus on, the better that you feel. And the experience of being incarnated in a physical body is one that's very rich with a lot of sensory input and experience. And as much as we can, even, to some degree in the tougher moments of it, we can try to navigate it with unconditional love for ourselves and try to enjoy the ride as much as we can.
Oh, thank you. That's beautiful. Oh, gosh, I have loved this conversation. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing today, Amy.
I loved it too. And thank you so much for having me, Hannah.
It's my pleasure. So do reach out to myself or Amy to continue this conversation. And if you would like to work with Amy or read her books, you can find her at www.amyleemccree.com. Go and check out her lovely Instagram. It's at Amy Lee McCree. She also has a podcast, which I've been on with too, Happily Holistic Podcast. It's on all major platforms and I love it. It's a really great podcast. And of course, I mentioned about the books. They're on Amazon. I will link all of them below. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this episode today. Please share, subscribe, and review. It is greatly appreciated. And I hope you all find grace in your week ahead.